Hello and welcome to IlaNomics. This is a special episode of IlaNomics, or a different episode of IlaNomics, if I can call it that, because we are not doing this live, but we are recording this and bringing to you in an episode where we are unable to take your questions, and we are apologetic about that. But we are doing this for a reason, because today, the day we are recording, is the day when Russia has invaded Ukraine. And Ukraine has responded, so there is conflict. You can call it war, it is war. And it has severe repercussions across the world, global repercussions, not just in the diplomatic, geopolitical areas, but also for the economy, which is what Professor Ila Patnaik and I will be discussing. And this happens at a time when things were turning for India, the Indian economy, and we were just out of the third wave of Omicron. Ila, what timing? I mean, this
very
timing,
unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
We just got through the third wave, and look at what is happening.
Yes, it is very unfortunate, because this is going to have major implications for the economy, for investment, for currency, for policy, for prices, for fiscal. So it is indeed very, very unfortunate.
Yeah. So, and your column, which has been published Friday morning, talks about how the Indian economy and various sectors of the economy had begun to recover, and now we have this shock. Do you want to talk about the recovery first a little bit?
Yes, sure. So we are seeing a lot of indicators now coming back up, and that includes investment, because credit to large firms has gone up. We're also seeing consumer sentiment improve. So, consumer sentiment is kind of a lagging indicator. It improves only after people start getting jobs. So the recovery led to hiring, increases in hiring, and the hiring leads to people getting incomes and them thinking that, okay, now we can spend more. So in that sense, it's a lagging indicator. So we are seeing both ends, of the investment end, where the first step is credit. And so we're seeing that, and we are seeing consumer sentiment improve. And I think hopefully, we don't see a hit to that.
Yeah.
Might.
And the biggest headline coming out of this conflict for us, one of the biggest is oil price. Thursday, which is the day when we are recording this, it crossed 100. It, I think, touched 105, and we don't know where oil prices will go, because there is fear in the world that global disturbance will obviously hurt oil supplies.
Yeah. So actually, many of us were very surprised that RBI had taken, I think, an assumption of 75 as had the budget.
70 to 75.
70 to 75, and then got inflation forecast of 4.5. So, and it was, in a period when the conflict was, in the last few weeks, when the conflict was actually imminent, and an invasion was being discussed and people were talking about it, and no scenarios were built for what this would mean. But, so if you try to think through those scenarios, where if instead of 72 to 75, the oil price is, let's say, 100. So, I mean, today it might reach 105, but tomorrow it could be 95, but let's say an average of 100. Now, that is going to feed into prices in many ways. So, one is the direct impact. Immediately, there's a direct impact on oil, fuel prices. Second is an impact through an increase in transport prices. So there's a direct effect, and then there is an indirect effect, and the indirect effect could also, that pass through is also significant in today's day and age, when things are, sourced from all across the country. And the third effect that it would have is through fiscal policy. So what happens is that when oil prices increase, things like your fertilizer subsidy, your fertilizer subsidy goes up, and this fertilizer subsidy is a large enough number. When the fertilizer subsidy goes up, you also get an increase in the total borrowing of the government, and so you get an expansionary fiscal, and that expansionary fiscal also has an impact on pushing inflation up. So if all these three were to feed back into the inflation forecast, then instead of 4.5, one would be much higher. Now, the question, I guess, must be on your mind is, so what does that mean for monetary policy? Does that mean that now interest rates will start going up? And I bet you would want to say, no, that shouldn't happen, because after all, this is a supply side shock, and so why would you kill me doubly? I'm being killed by what's happening on these fronts, and then you want to turn around and you want to raise interest rates also. But I think the way monetary policy works is that we look at that is why a 4.5 forecast was like kind of allowing RBI to keep rates unchanged. If the forecast had been, I'm just saying 5.5, okay, so I've not done I've not run the models, but suppose oil price is 100 and the forecast of inflation is say 5.5 or 6. Now that would lead the MPC to at least dampen that part of demand where it can, and to impact inflationary expectations. So this might also give you, sooner than you expected, tighter monetary policy. So a larger fiscal deficit on account of higher oil prices and higher fertilizer subsidies, and a tighter monetary policy. Those could be the kind of...
To be fair to the RBI and the MPC, well, tensions were building up in Europe, but I'm sure they did not think that Mr. Putin would actually go to war.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I guess they didn't, and we don't really, it's not that one is trying to say that they should have worked out all scenario. It's just that a lot of people were surprised at the 4.5, and it looks like it will actually be higher now. So, they would need to revisit, maybe in the next policy, they would need to revisit their forecast.
And besides oil, which is petroleum and gas, there is also fear of other supply disruptions. For instance, sunflower oil, which is a major, cooking medium in India. A big portion of our supplies of sunflower seeds comes from Ukraine. We don't buy too much, petrol from Russia and all of that, so that doesn't account for much. But there are things like then metal prices are going up, aluminium prices are going up. So there will be some kind of a ripple effect, isn't it, Ila?
See, there can be various things that happen, and it's very difficult to anticipate. So while some things may, like sunflower oil, may be directly affected, Ukraine is the granary of the world, granary of Europe particularly, and oil prices going up, as well as supply disruptions and war, and the uncertainty due to war can disrupt a lot of things. And I mean, it's very hard to say what exactly will happen, but I think it's just bad news for us. We just, yesterday when we were writing this, we were saying these are the variables that are showing a recovery, but there is a downside risk from coming from a possibility of an invasion, and then you
wake up and it's happened. So prices we've discussed, and what does it do to the budget? I mean, now the budget had taken certain assumptions and projected its accounting and its investments and spending for the next financial year. Does that get affected?
So, as I said, the one thing that does get affected is your fertilizer subsidy, and you may also see a lot of volatility in markets. I mean, you see, a lot of it was unfortunately already volatile. So when people say, why did the government not achieve its disinvestment target when it could have sold a lot of shares in the market, and now it can still do so, and you can have an IPO, LIC IPO, or various other things. A war causes volatility, a war also makes people think, okay, maybe things will get better, so let us postpone investment. Postponing investment could often mean slower growth today, because you're postponing a investment which is a source of demand and would have pushed up supply. So initially investment is demand, later it supplements supply. So in this year, when the main source of increase in demand was to come from investment, all we can hope is that it doesn't affect the demand side too much, because the economy had just started picking up and confidence had just started picking up.
The other point you make or you have made in your piece, Ila, is inflation hitting the margins of companies, because the companies also, were part of the recovery process, and slowly corporate earnings were beginning to look better. People were getting into some kind of capex. Once demand comes back, companies will also start making investments. And now with this kind of inflation,
so we had started noticing that input costs for companies had gone up, okay, and that their margins were at the risk of getting hit. And what we see is that after COVID, and now with this new inflation as well, what we expect is that companies' input costs will go up, and then instead of being able to absorb them all, especially those companies who have more branded products, where the price elasticity is low, those costs will get passed on to consumers. So you sometimes have a situation where a company thinks that, okay, my input costs have gone up, but if I pass these on to consumers, demand for my product will go down. Whereas if the company has a strong market share and demand is inelastic, it might pass on the input costs. So now that input costs have started rising, and with this phenomenon, with this war today, we expect that they could go up further. You might see some of that happening as well.
So, this is probably my last question, because it's still too early to talk about too many things, because it's just events are unfolding. A rate hike is something which is now desirable, is like what you have hinted in your desirable. Is that correct?
So, let's just step back and look at what has been happening on monetary policy. The 91-day T-bill rate has been rising for the last couple of months or so, and is no longer hugging the bottom of the corridor. So if I define the corridor as the repo on top and the reverse repo at the bottom, then it's no longer hugging that. It's kind of inching up. Which means, in other words, for the layman, it means that RBI has already tightened liquidity. Or because of the fisc, the impact on interest rates has already been to push them up. Okay. So if RBI had tightened rates, it would have been more an acceptance of the hiked rates. It would have been more an acceptance of the fact that, look, this is already happening. I am now acknowledging that this is what is happening, and maybe the reverse repo rate could have come up. Of course, there's a discussion about whether the MPC should determine the reverse repo or not and policy rate, but whether the MPC does it or the RBI does it, that's one step that could have been taken. And I would say it was desirable, not because it would push rates up, but it was desirable because you are being truthful. You are no longer pretending that I can keep the reverse repo low, and that somehow seems to indicate that I'm keeping rates low, whereas rates have actually gone up. So in that sense, it would have been desirable.
In considering it would be desirable in that sense, the next MPC meeting is due only in April, and we just got through a meeting in February. So do you think there is time until April, or a mid or a pre-April correction is necessary?
I don't think they're going to do a pre-April. Maybe they do, but I don't expect a correction before the next MPC meeting. I think in the next MPC meeting, they could possibly revise their forecast to indicate that monetary policy would be normalized, and 3 that they could raise the reverse repo, though the reverse repo can in principle, as you're saying,
outside of the meeting,
be done outside of the policy MPC as well.
Thank you, Ila. We can stop this discussion right here because, like I said, things are unfolding, and if it calls for something special, we will come to you even before the next IlaNomics earlier in the week. But we will watch this and we will keep you posted. Thanks for watching. We will be back again next week, and we will be live next week and take your questions. So please stay tuned and stay safe. Thank you very much.